Class, and welcome to English 102. I'm excited to have each one of you in my class, and I just wanted to introduce you to the course and just kind of walk you through Canvas, where to find everything, and talk a little bit about the first story for this week. If you have any issues finding your textbook or buying it, please let me know. I can help provide readings in the meantime while you wait to get your textbooks. If you have any questions or concerns and throughout the class, please don't hesitate to reach out. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Um, so my name is Julie Mathis Isbell. I have been teaching at Jeff State since 2019. Um, excuse me, I have had a little bit of a cold. I predominantly do teach 102, also teach 101, and I am originally from Birmingham. I did attend Birmingham Southern College, and then I finished my master's degree at Delta State. So that's some about me. I do have a 2-year-old little boy named AJ as well. Um, so, like I said, I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you and just looking at the homepage here. Excuse me. Um, so you'll see it has announcements every week. I will post um, information on what we're doing that week and with links to the assignments. So for this week, that there's an introduction to the course discussion that's due today, a quiz on barn burning, which is a story by Faulkner, and then visual rhetoric and barn burning. So that's a comparative analysis of photos in connection to the story. Is just any creative way to connect with literature is something that I like to emphasize in this class, and then to just kind of get you thinking about different approaches to looking at literature, which this is building off of 101 based on what rhetoric is, but now we are diving into literature. Your textbook looks like this, and it's called The Norn Introduction to Literature, shorter for 14th edition. You can find it on Amazon. It is in the Trojan book bag, but the link to Amazon is right there. Um, and so here it is on Amazon. If you do want to buy it on Amazon, you can. Um, and it will pull up, prices here, whatever's the best deal. Um, but anyhow, so each week on Sunday night, usually late Sunday night, I post what we're doing the next week, and we'll meet every Friday at this time, or maybe around 8 o'clock sometimes. Or if the time changes any, I will let you know. Um, and so I will upload these recordings as well. I do give instructions, and when you go into our modules, there is a start here module, so make sure you complete that and read the syllabus. And there's a participation quiz, there's a course overview, and this just tells you in general what we are going to be focusing on in this class, um, that there will be 4 formal analytical essays, at least one of which is a research project. And so that's similar to 101, but in this case, it'll be based on literature. Hi, Jaden. How are you doing? Did you have a good break?
Yeah. I actually just had a good day because of the snow.
Yeah, I was glad it snowed too, just
I'm so
because it,
happy it did.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you had a good Christmas break, and I can't
Yeah, it
believe that it's
was
already time to go back to class now. So
yeah, it was a fun break. I had fun, but we're back.
that's
So
good. Yeah,
yeah,
so
I'm ready.
I'm sorry I started early, but this is the book. I don't know if you can see. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, that's the textbook. Do you have the book yet, or do you need um
Is
any
it I think I have it on like the online through our Pioneer Pack thing.
Yes, it should be through the parent, because I did make sure that they had the UPC and everything. that you should, or actually not UPC, the ISBN number, the book number. They should have the book number, and you should be able to get it through Pioneer Pack.
Yeah, I need
But
to.
it's
I
also
gotta.
on Amazon too.
Yeah, I gotta access like the. I gotta find the link to get to my stuff, but I know I have. I think one thing coming in for another class, but I think everything else is online.
Okay, that's good. Well, if you have any questions about, or if you know, if you, I can, you can find the readings online. For instance, what I do is say, that's why I posted the barn burning. I'll just type in barn burning, Faulkner for the reading for this week, and then full text, and then it'll pull up this one right here I know is a full text, and so it will pull up the whole story for you. Usually for this class, because it's short stories, poetry, and drama, you should be able to find, it may not be the exact translation, but it's gonna give you the same reading. But I still, it's still best to always have the textbook, because the textbook does break down the units with the short story and the poetry. It does explain literary terminology in it, which is important, and explain why they group certain stories together and whatnot. And so it's a lot more helpful to have the book. The only thing though about this textbook, it does give you questions at the end of the reading, but it does not always tell you much context about some of the like poetry, for example. I think most of the short stories even. I don't know if they don't provide much context on even, they'll put like a paragraph. So you have some context, but there's not a whole lot. They'll just put a paragraph about the author. So even with that, it tells you some about the author, when they lived and what they did, and maybe a little bit about the reading, but there's not too much context. So in the PowerPoints, I tried to spend a while on the context of the reading, so you have that, because in my opinion, it's kind of difficult just, reading something and not really knowing much about the context of it or anything like that. Especially with the poetry too, that they will put the poetry just kind of they don't give much context. They'll put it in a section on like symbols or metaphors or whatever the section is we're talking about, but there's not much context before the poem. So it'll just have, whatever the title of the poem is and the poet. And so that's why I did try to make the PowerPoints detailed. So definitely when you study the readings, I would still, recommend maybe reading the PowerPoint first and then reading the reading and then looking back at the PowerPoint again, just so you have the context and everything, or in doing your own outside research on the context of the poem, and about the literary movement it was written in and whatnot. That will definitely help. Um, but it is a good book. Like I said, it groups all it gives you details before the unit about, why they group these stories together, but there's not as much context as I've seen before in some textbooks. So definitely make sure you check out the PowerPoints to help as well. But yeah,
Yeah,
like with
I've
this one, to the story, it doesn't have much context, so you would want to read the PowerPoint.
all right, and I will say I've accessed majority of our content for the class, but I have had some like issues with my Pioneer Pack and stuff, and I've emailed them, but I think it'll get resolved soon. But I can still
Okay.
access everything.
Okay, so do you need me to send you any of the readings for the next week?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I think I can. I can't find like my actual link to the book. That's the problem.
Do you think did you try to give him a call and tell them?
Yeah, I emailed them, but I'm gonna have to call them Monday or whenever they're open.
Yeah, I definitely would give them a call. They should be able to resend you the link, or
All right.
whatnot. They should be able to help you find it, or maybe tell you where to search to find the link to it. But if you do still have any problems though, like I said, I have the last semester I taught this last winter time that the bookstore actually got mixed up and a lot of my students bought the old textbook and so some of the readings were different. So I just every week I just would put the full text PDF of all the readings so they would have it. So like I said, if it comes down to that, I can find all the readings just in you without you having to pay anything or anything like that. I could find the readings for you for each week.
All right, thank you. I'll keep that in mind, but I'll just update you and see like whenever they respond.
Okay, that'll be
I think
good.
it I think it'll be okay.
But yeah, but just make sure to, so I was just going over the course overview and then about your instructor. So that just, and first, you know me, if I introduce myself again on this is a recording. And then the syllabus, there's the participation quiz, that was due yesterday. Um, if you, and it would, and if you do miss an assignment, just make sure you go back and do it. If you have any issues completing assignments, just let me know. And I think it is set to take 10% off per day an assignment's missing. But if you do have, if you email me and say, you really did forget or you had something that came up, I can fix the grade, just to be able to go back and fix the grade for you or, not count that assignment or whatnot if needed. Um, and so, um, and then there's the schedule for the class. So this is the tentative calendar. Um, and so this just gives you a guide of what we're doing, and everything's going to be in the modules as well. So for this week, it's to read pages 1 through 9 and 145 to 159 of the textbook, and then complete the introduction to the course discussion, um, and also the discussion on barn burning and the video quiz. Did the link to the video, did that work okay for have you taken the quiz yet? I need to
For
double check
the quiz
the
on
barn
barn
burning.
burning, I've accessed it. I haven't taken it yet, but I'm
Okay.
probably gonna do it today.
That put the video. I just want to make sure because sometimes, yeah, the video does work. Just want to make sure it still works because sometimes it
Yeah.
doesn't always work. So that gives you, and that's the link to the reading too, if you hadn't read the story. Um,
All right.
and then everything's the similar to last time. It's in modules. Because we transfer from Blackboard, I did have to work on just reorganizing it, and so it's not exactly as it was is with the one-on-one. Like I did put a video here, but each week I have the objectives, and I don't have all the direct links except for I have everything in the module itself. So you have the PowerPoints here, and then at the top you'll have it'll tell you, what's due, but I don't have all the links in all this, but everything is in the module itself. So for week 2, under apply, there's a discussion and paragraph assignment, and then the quizzes. So that everything is in the module, but I didn't have as much time to go back and do everything because everything was kind of all it took me a while to get this in the way it is right now because it was a different formatting and everything. But everything is going to be in the modules that you need. All the PowerPoints will be under Learn. And with the class too, that is going to be similar to the last one. There's the mini um, projects or assignments, use paragraph assignments. Um, and then there's the discussions that are 15%. The mini projects are 20% of the grade. Quizzes are 10%. Um, and then the 4 major 100-point essay assignments are 35% of the grade. And so that's very similar to the last class. It's just we're studying 3 genres of the short story, poetry, and drama. And so we'll have the first major 100-point essay will be on barn burning. It'll be a visual literary analysis on barn burning, looking at the symbols and the text, um, and really just looking at the different vantage points of of, freedom and um, from the vantage point of Sardi and Abner, just their views on life. And so the paper will focus on, I think it's power, liberation, identity. Those are the main points that we'll have to look at in the body paragraphs and connection to um, part of it. We'll be looking at this image again for that, just kind of connecting that to your writing, the image of the barn burning that ties into the barn burning. But we'll talk about this in more detail. But do focus on that reading because that's going to be the first paper due in February. And then we'll have a comparative poetry analysis. Or you could write a historical parody and multimodal options. So you can choose between writing a comparison across within or across genres, or doing a historical parody of a poem and then writing a paper. So you would actually write the poem and then write a paper on how you came up with that historical parody based on a poem we read. So that'll be up to you, what you like to do for that assignment. Some students like more traditional assignments and others like to be more creative. So that's why I gave the option there. And then we'll study Othello. And Othello will be looking at tragedy in this particular paper that you can draw from film or other media sources and just be looking at the nature of the fourth wall. And when we get to Othello, we'll talk about, could the tragedy have been prevented if he had actually um, I guess, communicated better because he seemed in this particular play that Shakespeare wrote, he believes a man called Iago and never questions him if he had, and we'll talk about issues of race and, of course, there's a lot more to race and politics and in this particular play, but essentially that if he had actually spoken his true feelings, it's just a question of could that have prevented the tragedy from happening, and you'll actually do like a rewrite of a scene, um, and then you'll critique scenes where he does break the fourth wall, but just evaluate, could he have communicated better? Because in that play, it's a lot of issue with communicating correctly. He doesn't end up communicating correctly with his wife and distrusts his wife when she didn't do anything. Things like that we'll talk about in that particular paper. And then for the research paper, you can choose to write about Othello, Oedipus the King, or A Doll's House. And then the multimodal option is if you want to do a PowerPoint, and it still has to have the research in it, but you could do a PowerPoint on A Doll's House, and that still counts as your research project. So that's the option for the paper as well. So the last big paper will be on drama. And so those are the major papers we'll be writing. And with your textbook too, that we'll be studying all different types of literature, from American literature to British literature. It's not one set type of literature, and it goes from the classical age. Really, the most ancient work would be Oedipus the King, and that'll be later on. But it goes from ancient to postmodern writing, so the 1960s or so, and um, so we'll be studying all from ancient through, I guess, like the 1960s or 70s writing. So it covers a lot of different styles of writing, especially when we look at poetry. Um, we'll be looking at classical poetry versus modern poetry, and with modern poetry, some of the poems just have a few words and they're still a poem, but you can still dig in deep and find a lot of symbolism in it. And so with the PowerPoints on that too, I tried to be detailed so you can kind of see, well, for instance, one is called um, um, it's William Carlos Williams, The Red Wheelbarrow. And I know I spent a long time trying to just break down the individual words into different ways to look at it. There's a lot of different approaches you can take, even if it's a short poem or if it's really long. Um, and I know that's why I chose the comparative analysis, because I know some students wouldn't want to just write one paper on just a poem. They would want more things to do with it, like compare and contrast to have, because the poem is so short, you can write, research paper on just one poem, but to keep it to where you do have more to talk about, sometimes it is good to have another poem to compare it to in the same genre or outside of a genre. Um, but we'll study in the sonnet, the ode. With Sylvia Plath is a postmodern poet. She wrote confessional poetry. We'll study her poetry. John Donne, he wrote this sonnets in the Renaissance. Shakespeare, even Psalm 23, it is considered to be poetry, and that will be one of the first poems we read as well. With Shakespeare's "Shall I come here lead to a summer's day?" Um, and then I already said ode. Those are some of the main and also lyrical poems. So another modern poem we'll read is Those Winter Sundays. Um, and then the Red Wheelbarrow. I think that kind of we won't read quite as many. I mean, there'll be a few poems, but we do have a few more short stories, ranging from Poe to Virginia Woolf. A new one I added was Kafka's The Hunger Artist. And then The Thing in the Forest. I thought that was a fun read. Um, it's different, and it's by A.S. Byatt, and that was written based on the World War II era. And then also a new poem I added was a Plath poem, Lady Lazarus. So we'll read Daddy and Lady Lazarus, and that will kind of conclude our studies of poetry. And then we'll read Oedipus the King, um, Othello, and A Doll's House. And A Doll's House is a poem, sorry, a play from the 1800s. So that Oedipus is from ancient Greece, and then that will move into the 1500s and then the 1800s. So we'll kind of go in chronological order. Um, but the syllabus is here, and this is the printable version of just the course expectations. The calendar isn't on here, so I do recommend if you want to print that, and then just make sure you do, go through and read through all of this. That Yeah, and just always send me an email if you have any questions. That I do still recommend the tutor.com. I'm going to try to go back and add that to the essays. We are going to be using Turnitin, which is, I've never actually used it in the way this has been done, but I'll have to come up with a release date to release feedback. But I will still add the tutor.com um, for extra credit for the peer revision. So I will still go back and add that. So I do still recommend you use the tutor.com. Um, though we're not doing major revisions this time, like we did with 101, that well, if you still want to talk about your paper, anytime we're doing the revision before the draft, talking about your paper, and giving you feedback on that, I may give you extra credit just for taking feedback before it's actually due if you do implement some of the ideas, just looking through it. But that would be if you would have to send me the paper first to kind of, well, actually, that would not work. But I'm trying to think if we really can't do exactly the same thing as last time because we don't do the major revision. But I guess that, after I turn the paper back to you, just talking through the paper again, if you'd like to come on and talk about the paper, and then if I see definitely, you're making improvement from that last paper and whatever it is, I always like to give extra credit anyhow. So I'll give you extra credit for, coming to the team's meetings and participating and, wanting feedback and whatnot. So it'll be similar, but we're not doing the outlining and the major revision, just the peer revision, or, you review your own paper and then the 100-point paper. But like I said, if you do want, feedback, just talking through it again, besides just looking at comments and writing, um, I'll still give you extra credit for seeing if, in the next paper that you've improved, whatever that is, or you took some of the feedback and used it, whatever it is. And just, yeah, make sure that you do, send me an email, or you can always contact me by phone if needed. And there is a course chat option too. I saw that this was available. So you can always send me a message here, too, if I'm on here. If you have any questions, I think that's another way to reach me besides phone or email. Um, and so in this class that we are, writing, um, the four compositions, but we'll be learning about literary criticism and barn burning. Um, there is a PowerPoint slide on formalist criticism, and so formalists believe that there's nothing outside the text itself. And so all the symbols and the imagery that is necessary to do a thorough reading is all in the text itself. And so, looking at barn burning from a formalist standpoint would be a good way to approach it. But there's a lot of different types of literary criticism, like new criticism. You're looking for ambiguities and paradoxes to find an interpretation. New historicism, you're looking for other cultural factors that would have influenced the correct interpretation, things like that. And there's also feminist criticism. There's a long list, but we'll use that to kind of engage in discussions and be able to read a text, and then conduct research on literature. I do have a library page on. See if I can find it. So under English, I think I still saw that I had this is for the research paper, but I do have a page on here of um resources that will be helpful for this class too. And you can use this throughout the whole semester. It's like I said, it's very helpful to have because I did put the research project. I think that the librarian directly linked a lot of um, information on these plays to here. So that should help you as you're reading it and whatnot. Like I said, it's been a little while since I taught this class, but as I went back on there for the 101, I saw that this was still here. And so this will help you. And if you have free time, if you want to take a look at it. But um, the librarian, I think, put this together. But you do have to log into your account and whatnot. But I think this will take you to some research. Yeah, so here's about Henrik Ibsen, who wrote A Doll's House. So this is really helpful. So I definitely would recommend using this and checking it out. And like I said, that'll be helpful whenever we get started on the paper. Just if you want to take a look at that before the paper, um, whatever you want to start reviewing it. Um, but for the PowerPoint for barn burning, so barn burning is by Faulkner. He was one of the great Southern authors. And this particular story, there's a lot of really vivid imagery in this text, and we'll talk about this more next Friday. But in general, that William Faulkner, he was a native of Oxford, Mississippi, and he left high school without graduating and joined the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1918. And he is known for, As I Lay Dying, The Hamlet, Absalom, Absalom. He spent time in Hollywood writing screenplays for The Big Sleep and other films. So he's a very well-known figure. And as I started to teach this too, the first paragraph of the text, what I did was I circled some words that described um, different types of imagery, like visual imagery, um, 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 trying to think of the correct term for that, for imagery of smell, like so that even like how something smells is a type of imagery, or auditory imagery, hearing, any sort of tactile imagery, or um, kinesthetic imagery would be imagery of motion. So there's tactile, there's auditory, there's Gustatory is a taste. Smell though, I'm not sure what. I guess gustatory falls under smell. Um, and um, imagery of motion. So, like for instance, that the nail keg smelled cheese, loose packed stomach, red, scarlet devil, silver, smelled. So the word smelled is emphasized a lot here. So that is, showing that that the atmosphere, the mood is being influenced by these smells that are not necessarily very pleasant, and it's contributing to Sardi's fear, his despair, and grief, which are all words in this first paragraph as well. That starts by saying the store in which the justice of the peace's court was sitting smelled of cheese, and that's how it starts. So it's starting with a smell that that doesn't smell very good, and you could probably imagine that probably if it's in a place like that, it probably smells stale. And so that's setting the mood. And so in literature, the mood is and the atmosphere do really impact our reading of the text. And Faulkner really focuses on these literary devices, and we'll be focusing on the literary devices of setting, mood, tone, and mood is connected to atmosphere. But tone is the author's attitude towards the subject. Mood is the atmosphere. So the mood is already foul, or it's not, you know, something that's not pleasant. And then these smells, and there's alliteration here: scarlet devils and silver curve of the fish. So the S he repeated, scarlet and silver, and then smell, like, so that the S sounds repeated because these things that are not very pleasant are being tied to the word smell. And then it says, little of fear because mostly of despair and grief and a fierce pool of blood. And this text also focuses on a lot of colors, red and black, and other we'll see other colors like blood is obviously red. So we'll definitely see some colors be important, or gray even, because Abner's eyes are gray. So any sign of darkness or the fire itself or Abner's eyes, those are all symbolic as well. So when you're reading this, look for words and phrases that stand out. Um, and in the PowerPoint, I know in one of these I should have posted. Yes, so here in the week one intro, I'm pretty sure I did put a list of literary techniques and things like that. So make sure you do read that. So definitely setting, that describes, when the story begins and where it takes off. Um, and this tells you about what is fiction versus nonfiction. Of course, fiction is a made up story. Nonfiction is a story that is accurate, and talks about genres. I believe I put, and so this is different types of poetry. This is how to read a character, their purpose, how do they move the plot forward? Are they the main character or the antagonist or a background character? Are they a foil to a character? And then the tone, here it is. That is the author's attitude. So in the beginning, we can see that probably, Faulkner himself, even though we are seeing Sardi's vantage point here, that obviously that we see that probably the author's probably sort of disgusted too, if he's writing these graphic images that are tied to the disdain that poor Sardi has in the beginning of this, and the mood. So this is really important because Faulkner really plays on mood, because we see the words even spelled out for us, that grim faces on the next page. I had circled grim faces and frantic grief and despair. So grief and despair are repeated on both pages, the first two pages. Um, and definitely that there is some suspense, because we have a feeling that something bad's going to happen. That Sardi tries to hope and pray that maybe his father will change, but his naivety is kind of overshadowed. Um, and of course, eventually that his father dies, um, and presumably his brother dies as well. But basically that, looking at in this particular time, we're looking at the antebellum era, and there is, issue of race. And Abner, his father, who is afraid he's afraid that Sardi's going to speak badly of him on trial, so he abuses him. And of course, Sardi, he was wanting to stand up for his father. He's willing to always stand up for him until he started to realize that this is not who he really was. He was only a small child, and this is not who he is as a person. These are choices his father is making to be, essentially, he does not like other races. He doesn't like the upper class, and he wants to destroy the upper class by burning their homes. And so Sardi realizes that this is morally and ethically wrong. So when we look at ethics, excuse me, that Sardi, ethically decides for himself, just based on natural law and in his innate conscience, that this is not right. Excuse me. And then in the end, he decides, he's got to break free from this. But then the question is, and doing research on this too, is Sardi really ever truly free? Because he still lives in that, even as he leaves, and the ending is not practical. A 10-year-old, cannot be on their own without family as he escapes. He would have had to go somewhere else to be taken care of. But let's just say, he did go to somewhere else and they took care of him. But he's still thinking that, that his father was a general in Colonel Sartoris's cavalry. And that is a phrase he keeps thinking at the end. He's such a good person. He still thinks that of the good, that tries to look at the best in people, the best in his father, even though his father is a very callous man. He abuses him. He's verbally abusive. Um, like I said, he does not like other races and does not like the upper class and plays the victim. Like he believes that, it's because of the upper class they put him in this situation. So he blames them and believes that he's correct for what he's doing, and he tries to coerce Sardi into doing this, and he knows it's wrong. But he was so yeah. So in the end, he says he was in Colonel Sartoris's cavalry. So he's still living in this sort of this delusion, so to speak, in the end. But it's showing that, he wants to think the best of his father. Um, and that's all that person could do. They want to think the best of their own family, but yet he knows what he's done is wrong. But the question is Sardi actually fated because of this generational curse? Or do you, like, the question is, as you're reading, do you think that he will ever truly be free from the bondage that of his father, and basically the curse that he put his family through of, being a bigot and also being discriminatory of, the upper class and other races. And of course, at that time, it was not common because racism was an issue, but Sardi knows that this is wrong, and he tries to train his children to not like the upper class and not like other races, which is, not, and even Sardi knows this is not right. And so that's the big question: is what is he ever, truly free from this? And can he ever truly be free from this, even though his father is gone? And then looking for themes like good versus evil, redemption, courage, and perseverance. We do see that Sardi coming of age and his courage and perseverance. Those are things that we see in the story because he does have a lot of perseverance. And then the Aristotelian plot structure begins with the exposition, the rising action, the crisis, falling action, and conclusion or resolution. And we'll spend a lot of time on this throughout the semester as well. But the exposition is that context. When does the story happen? What are the two main events leading up to a main conflict or the crisis? What are the events that lead to the conclusion? Is the conclusion good or bad? Is it peaceful or happy, or is it tragic? and we'll be looking at different types of genres like tragedy, comedy. Um, I know with the plays that we were reading two tragedies and really one realist play, which is just about everyday life. Um, really not too many comedies, but with especially with theater, it's tragic comedy is a mixture of tragedy and comedy. There's comedy, tragedy, there's historical plays. Um, so we'll talk about the different types of genres. And then looking at, the setting, and then that's subject to change, but we talked about that too. So the setting of, barn burning is we see him in that, um, you know, the the justice of the peace's court. And it's just like I said, there's so many instances with, just how harrowing it is to see a poor child, getting having to go through this. And basically, he's trying to indoctrinate, his child and with his mentality. And of course, Sardi knows it's wrong. That's what makes it unique. That even though he's a malleable child, that he does in his own conscience, he knows it's not right. This cannot be right. And um And that's what, we see with the goodness and of truth in the story that Faulkner's showing that though not sorry he's naive, he is not so naive that he doesn't understand, what should ethically be right. Even he's wise beyond his years, yet he still is naive, and so that makes him a complex character. Um, and then the style. So with Faulkner, that's why I think this is such a good read too. And it even took me when I first read the story, I think I had to go back and reread it too because it just starts out and you kind of get lost and then you have to go back and try to work through it just because it starts, in that courtroom. It's not like there's a whole lot of other context behind it and just starts out like that. So I think that makes it a little bit harder to read, but you can go back and read through it. Um, but his style is very ornate. The diction is very lavish, and you can the imagery is palpable. So similar to Poe, that Poe's imagery is palpable as well. Of course, he's a Southern Gothic um, writer. We'll be reading Poe, I believe, not next week, the week after next. The Black Cat, which that's an interesting read as well. But with Poe, a lot of his characters very similar. If you've ever read Telltale Heart or Fall the House of Usher, um, all of his characters kind of have these same quirks and things like that. I've noticed not necessarily every one of them, but he kind of has a stereotype of characters that are paranoid and that have a lot of psychological and emotional issues and whatnot. And so we'll read that story. And then with Virginia Woolf too, her writing is extremely ornate as well. And she is also a modernist author. Lots of vivid details. So definitely when we're looking at detailed writing, Faulkner and Poe and Wolfe, they use a lot of imagery, but that makes it to where it's easier to find something to write about, though, because you'll be able to find some good images. And when you're writing about the literature, too, um, you always want to introduce the source, like I say, according to Faulkner and Barn Burning, and then you would quote, say, what's the justice asked, "What's your name, boy?" If that's what you're saying, then you would cite Faulkner 147, and then you would explain what the quote means, and then requote the diction that's important, that stands out, the imagery that stands out, and explain the symbolism and the imagery, and just breaking down the words and looking for. We'll be talking about metaphor, alliteration, personification, any way to decode it with your knowledge of mood and tone and um, your other plot devices that are necessary, and then bringing in the other literary devices of metaphors and alliteration. And when like for instance in that first page, like the repetition of letter S in that first paragraph, so that means that those words are standing out here because they are creating that um the atmosphere, that even the air doesn't smell good, and because it smelled and it smelled of scarlet devils and silver curved fish. And then also the word um, fear is repeated throughout the story as well. Um, but definitely we see despair repeated, um, and um, and fear is also a word that's repeated in this text as well. So that kind of lets you know that those are really important words. And anytime you see any patterns, any repeated words or language or images, write it down. Write down any important quotes from the characters that you see that explain how they're moving the plot forward, and any significant literary techniques and devices that can help you decode the meaning, anything symbolic. Um, I encourage you to do that and just take notes as you read and, either mark up your textbook or, make good notes as you read it. And then, of course, read the PowerPoint. And then you do your own outside research as well. I really encourage that. I think it does help a lot. Just, you'll have the PowerPoints in depth, but even doing your own research will help as well. Um, then there's different types of dialogue, inner dialogue, monologues or when you have the inner dialogue, and then you have a monologue that's a long speech that's just by one actor. Um, and then of course there's direct dialogue that's you when they are speaking to another character. And I think this explains what a literary analysis is. That I'm trying to see if this is the same. No, I might have accidentally left this from the other type. Yeah, so I believe that this page 6. Yeah, why read? So page 6 begins with why read literature, and then your text does give you examples of um, papers as well and um, whatnot. There's a lot of information on reading and responding to literature, and it does give you examples of writing that help in this book. So that's another use of the textbook. Is it that look? We're just looking through pages 6 through 30. It will give you examples, and we'll go over those as well, especially as we get to the paper. So just reviewing what the definition of a genre is, a category of writing. So like poetry, film, drama, but then it also can be subcategories like comedy or tragedy or um, tragicomedy. What's the definition of tone? So we have, that's the author's attitude towards the subject, and you should be able to detect that and how they're writing and responding to the situation. In the mood is the atmosphere, the imagery that's explaining, how to the author's wanting you to perceive um, feeling and emotion in the text. And then what is the definition of a protagonist? The protagonist is the main character, and an antagonist is the opposite. And there could be flat characters and round characters, and flat characters are not well known. Round characters are, we know, everything about them. And then, of course, the protagonist is the main character, and the antagonist is the villain. Um, in the setting, and so that will, you know, change throughout the course of the plot, but that's, where the story begins. And then when we go through the plot, we have the exposition, the rising action, crisis, falling action, and resolution. And just reviewing the points of view too. So, the third person point of view is the most common. Um, and when we're reading fiction, and that stories are a part of our daily life and every culture, and they're what we tell when we return from vacation or survive an accident or illness. So basically, it impacts our everyday life. So they are relevant, even if they are fiction. That we can all relate to these stories in some way, and trying to relate to the story will help you to think of something to write about too. Trying to find something to connect with or relate to really does help you to see more in that story, or if you think someone else might could you could see that story through their eyes, or whether it's your eyes, that it's still going to help you to understand the story better and just really connect with it as well. um do you have any questions, Jaden?
No, I don't.
Okay. And we'll continue barn burning some next Friday, and then we'll also go over A Hunger Artist by Kafka. We'll do that. And that's another just the short read. But if you do need that reading though, if you need any readings, just send me an email or and just let me know, and I will be glad to find those for you and send them to you.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you were able to